I'm Jeff Zarnett, and this is Software Career Growth. Today, I have my first ever guest. It's a product manager whom I used to work with to talk about, well, being a product manager. Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by a special guest, and I know I might break some hearts by saying this, but I'm going to say the best product manager I've ever worked with, Arnon.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about what it's like to be a product manager and what it's like to work with a product manager. And I can think of nobody better who would be the first guest on this series. So please, Arnon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's just start by saying working with PMs is awful. PMs suck. Um, Thank you for that. The name's Arnon. I wasn't always a product manager. We talked about that briefly earlier. I told you no one ever dreams of being a product manager. You know, you always want to be a fireman or a astronaut or the president or something, that everyone knows. Somehow I ended up being a product manager. Originally, I said started as an engineer, did communication systems engineering, went through a little bit of engineering, found out I wasn't really good at that, and ended up migrating to product management eventually. What else
Okay,
should I
so
say?
how did you know that you wanted to be a product manager? Because I mean that is a path from
Yeah.
engineering.
So when I started with engineering, I didn't really know what a product manager was. I did know that we needed something. I'll give you an example. I was working on a database. We were building database software, and a request came in. You must build this function that converts a floating point number to a string, to a varchar in database terms. And I went back to the person who came up with that request, and I said, there's like 100 different ways to represent a floating point number. There's accuracy, there's precision, there's the scientific notation. Like, how should we pad the number? Like, what's up? And the answer was, we don't know. And then we never built that function, or we didn't build it for like 3 more years, because we didn't have someone who was, able to look at a product and say, for our product, this is what we need. This is how it needs to behave. This is what you should build. So engineers were making a lot of the decisions, and it's kind of fun making decisions as an engineer. But it ends up in a really weird kind of incohesive experience, because you're not thinking about the customer. Even if you are, you have a very skewed view of things because you are an engineer. You know the product internals, you know how to do things, but you're not thinking about the end user. So I didn't really know about product managers. Didn't really have one for a while. Then we eventually did get a product manager, and that was life-changing, right? Suddenly there's someone who can take responsibility and say, this is how it should look. For me, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be a product manager. It seemed really boring compared to actually writing code and deploying stuff and seeing how it works, and seeing people use the stuff that you wrote. I found that to be actually very enticing. I did a little bit of that. I did solution engineering, solution architecture, that kind of stuff, deploying our software and customers, and I really loved that. But I think at some point I realized the product wasn't going in the direction that I think it should be going. I was sitting with dozens of customers, and I saw their needs, and they weren't reflected in what we were building. So I was lucky enough that I could talk to people, and I ended up becoming a PM without any formal training, which I think is how most people end up being PMs, honestly.
That's fair. And as you say, it is a direction that if you're working on developing the software and this isn't really what you like. Yeah. So maybe tell me a bit more about sort of what are some indications that would tell somebody who was thinking about it, yes, product management is right for you.
If you're a bad engineer,
Don't say that. Oh, come on.
yeah, no, I mean, okay. So the product managers come in like a whole spectrum. You can be ultra technical, and you can work on a technical product. You can do things like defining the very low level specifications of how a database works, as was the case for my first role. And that's perfectly fine. That's a perfectly valid type of product manager. If you like, for example, looking at what's around you, you like doing a lot of research, finding out, okay, there are 15 databases, this is how they work. You like finding patterns. You like kind of forming a path based on what you think is right, then product management could be right for you. If you enjoy talking to customers, that's also a good sign. If you feel like you're an engineer and you don't have access to customers and you want that, you want to talk to them, you want to hear them, you want to see the product in its, in the wild, you might want to look at doing a little bit of product management. You're not necessarily going to become a full-fledged product manager. That might not be right for you. You might want to do it in stages. You might want to only dabble, only, for example, join a little bit of discovery sessions with another PM. You might want to join some conversations, and just see if that excites you. If it does, then try it out. If it doesn't, if you think, okay, well, this is boring, I just want to go back to my VS Code and compile some stuff, then I think the choice is rather clear.
Yeah, fair enough. And
or Emacs, which is what I used. No shade intended at any IDE.
Yeah, we don't want to start IDE wars in the comments.
No.
Even though comments are good for engagement, I really don't want to start that kind of war.
Drop in your best IDE in the comments below.
Okay. I like that plan. Let's see what people comment. Yeah. All right. So, like, after you made the switch to being a product manager, tell me a bit more about how the day-to-day of it changed.
So, like I said, I started as an engineer, and I was used to like delivering code, right? Whether that saw it to production or not doesn't matter. But I was used to getting up in the morning, heading to the office back when that was a thing, opening up Emacs, debugging something, writing some code, changing, recompiling. That was my output, right? That's what I saw. And I found it very nice. I like doing that. I was doing build scripts. I was doing Python continuous development pipelines. I was doing a whole bunch of different things, which I actually quite enjoyed, even though, like I said, was not a very good engineer. But when you switch over to being a PM, which is very hard, by the way, mentally, at least for me, I was suddenly not producing anything. Or what I was producing was pages in Confluence or a PowerPoint presentation or meetings, God forbid, right? That's what I was producing. And it was very depressing at the beginning. I found it very unsatisfying. I didn't have anything to show for it. All I had was a presentation or a Confluence page, later Notion pages. It was a little bit unsatisfying. I wanted to see something work. And that's like the first adjustment that you have to make. Your outputs and what you do in the company and your what value you bring changes. Because I say PowerPoint presentations and Notion pages and Confluence and whatever, those are outputs. But the outcomes of that, which is a very important thing that product managers love talking about, is alignment. It's getting people to understand what problem they're solving, making sure they're solving the right problems, making sure everyone's talking and people kind of understand what's going on around them, and managing the product. And managing the product is strange because you're not managing people directly, but you are getting them to do stuff. So that first migration, that first change is kind of hard because you are producing things that are different from what you're used to. And that can be a little bit, there's an adjustment period. So the first few weeks, months are going to be a little bit sad, honestly, if you're coming from engineering. If you're coming from consulting and you're used to doing presentations anyway, then maybe that's not such a big deal. But coming from an engineering background, that's what I felt.
No, that's fair. And I talked about it also in a previous video, this idea of if you're new to being a manager, when you close the laptop at the end of the work week, how do you know that you did a good job? And it's a lot harder to measure because as an engineer, you can look at pull requests completed or bug tickets reported or something that is helpful in measuring it with some numbers behind it. But quantifying, what is the impact of this prioritization session is obviously much harder.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on how you can sort of measure effectiveness as a PM?
And in some teams, you might, I think we had that at the beginning, you and I, we did work together, right?
We did.
There were a few situations where we weren't in the meetings. We weren't in the planning meetings or the retro meetings. We weren't like running the team day to day for a variety of different reasons. And the team kept running. And that was a strange feeling as well, because you're like, okay, what am I actually doing? Does the team need me? Can they keep producing like good stuff without me? And that's like a recency bias thing, because you're only thinking, okay, this last week we weren't there. The team kept working perfectly fine. They don't need us. But all of the preparatory work that we had done beforehand on getting the context down to the team, making sure they understand why something is worth doing, architecting things together, coming up with solutions to problems, the work that we had done before was very, very valuable. So sometimes it feels like you're not even necessary. But that's not actually true, because if you're going to be gone for a while, you're going to see what happens. Things start to deteriorate and fall.
That's true, but there is something to be said for the idea that if you're building up the team should be able to function without you. And it's risky in a way for the company if one person is so critical that they can never take a vacation because the things fall apart when they're not around. And that might be the case in your 5-person startup, right. But
at some point when you cross, I don't know, 30, 40 people, everyone should be replaceable. It might be painful, but everyone should be replaceable. And I think that's very true for product managers and engineers, and that's kind of how you want to build things. Is you want to make sure that you have, like, just like when you build I don't know, data pipelines or whatever, you're making sure that you have a backup or a redundancy or alerting if something is about to go wrong. You kind of want to do the same with people and with teams and with the things that you're building. You have to have backups for what you're doing. You have to have a backup plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. And realistically, right, the company shouldn't be in a situation, again, unless it's a 5-person startup where the loss of one person, even temporarily, is such a huge setback, because building your teams to independence is good. It's how you get to the future. So I like to see.
Along the topic of different sizes, product managers in different stages of a company's life cycle do very different things, right? When you're a 5-person company, the CEO is practically the product manager, or the head of engineering is a product manager. You're kind of deciding what to build, how to build it, what problems to prioritize. Now, product managers love prioritization, right? So that's when you're a small company, a lot of people kind of share this responsibility. When you get to a certain size, you need someone to focus on that, just like you need someone to focus on managing the people, just like you need someone to focus on hiring, right? That becomes a more specialist kind of role. And as companies grow and as they get bigger in size, the role also changes. You start from a product manager can own the entire product. Like when a small company, there is usually one product or roughly one product, right? Maybe there's a few delivery methods of it, like as a service, on-prem, whatever. But as companies grow and as they get bigger, what you actually manage as a product becomes a lot narrower. You start dealing with little quote little problem areas, problem spaces that are relatively easy to define. If we take an ultra extreme example, think about the person who manages the like button on Facebook. That is a role. And there are different ways that button interfaces with a lot of different things. So there's a lot of places where it might appear, you have like an embedding of that. That's a role. That's something that needs managing. It's a product. It's kind of weird thinking about it, but it is a product.
Yep. Yeah. And in early stages of Facebook, you wouldn't have a person whose sole responsibility it is to be product manager around that one feature, being able to like things.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the core of Facebook, was liking things, right? So that was kind of the product, to a degree.
I take your word for it, man. Yeah. Okay. So maybe you would like to say a bit more about sort of managing that transition from managing a huge amount of the product to specializing.
That's a hard one. Unless you're like the VP of product or chief product officer or something, you probably don't really get a say in that. It'll just happen. You will have PMs pop by around you and sit. You grow. Then you have 3, 4, 5, 10 PMs around you, and you have to start divvying up the product into different things. And you might not have a say in it depending on how your company is. When you're moving from like 1 PM to 3 PMs, it's not too hard. You can just talk to each other, right? And say, I'll take this, you take that experience, I'll take that experience. For example, if you're talking about an on-prem product, you could say, which is something I did, by the way, I'll take the installation experience, the deployment experience. Someone else can take the internals of the SQL database of how the functions work, right? Which is exactly what we had lacking at the beginning. You can kind of divvy that up, and there will be overlap, but that's fine. You're not managing something that's self-contained that only you do. There will always be interfaces. Those interfaces could be customers. It could be the CEO of the company coming in and saying, this is how I want this to look. That's an input, and you have that with other PMs around you. So it'll probably just happen unless you are leading the product, and in which case you decide when you need more. It'll kind of just happen around you. We're primarily talking about when you're at the beginning of your PM career, right?
Yes.
If you're at the beginning of your PM career and you're the head of product for the company, then
probably you're a co-founder.
You probably already know what you're doing, or roughly know what you're doing, and you can figure this out.
Yeah. I mean, it is possible to graduate from engineering with some product management experience. Like I know some capstone project groups where someone in the team has effectively appointed themselves product manager. And so they've spent a lot of time doing product management kind of duties. And if their intention is to take this idea and make a company out of it, then congratulations, you're the first PM of your little startup company.
Yeah.
So,
and that's perfectly fine, right? There's very little formal education that you would need as a PM. You need to know your customers, your product, or both, or like you need to be able to. You're kind of a generalist, right? You need to be able to connect different insights, let's call them, into an idea, into a cohesive idea, and be able to communicate that to other people. That's all a PM is. You're usually not writing code. You don't need to create the solutions. You will have engineers to do that. It's actually best if you don't come up with the solutions, because that's the engineer's job in most cases, or you should come up with it together, right?
I was going to disagree a little bit and say maybe you should work on these sorts of things together and try to come up with a good design, even if you don't have to focus on the implementation as a PM.
Yeah. So you keep it high level, right? You're not coming down with a detailed spec and a solution, and you write this code, then you deploy it there, then you do that. You can say high level, this is what I want, this is how I would like it to work. That's okay. But definitely don't tell engineers how what file to edit and that kind of stuff. That will not work well. I don't think.
Probably not.
No, I would hate that, and I'm assuming you would hate that too. So
yes, in general, I think it's unpleasant to be told how to do something when it's ostensibly your area of expertise.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride that goes into not just engineering, but also the product management side of things. And as a PM, I also don't like being told you have to have your roadmap look like this, and your objectives should look like that, and this is how you should prioritize. It's actually one of the things I hate the most is when someone comes up to me and tells me, can you do this? And I say, look, it's going to go in the list. We're going to put it in the backlog, but it's going to take a while because we have a lot of very urgent things. And then they respond and say, well, show me what you have and let me help you prioritize. Yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. So, it's kind of like a really bad code review where someone goes in and tells you, well, you shouldn't name this variable like that. Okay.
Yeah, I would have written a for loop.
Yeah. Yeah, you're using while.
Yeah, right. Who uses wild lives? Goodness me. Yes, that's fair. But that does kind of open up the idea of like, how do you prioritize? There's lots of people that are sticking up their hands saying, I want you to do this, or this is most important.
Yeah. You need to be very familiar with what you're doing. You will not know at first. And when you are very new, you can rely on all these little frameworks that help you kind of plot things along the graph. Is this urgent? Is this important? That kind of stuff. I think they hurt more than they help in the long run. I think it's useful to just align your head and understand what you're doing at the beginning. But later on, you should know. You should have an understanding of, okay, we have to do this, otherwise other stuff will break. Or if we don't do this now, it'll cost 5 times more to do it later. You can prioritize things when you're familiar with your product, when you're familiar with your customers, with what kind of drives them. If we're talking about, there might be legal reasons why you need to do something. There might be new legislation coming in. Look at GDPR and that kind of stuff. You don't really get a say in that. On a specific date, something happens and you have to be ready for that. So in that case, it's pretty clear cut. That goes first. With other things, it's based on your opinion of what is more important and what isn't. And one of the things you can do, and like I mentioned, some people will try to help you, or think they're trying to help you, and you can go back to them and say, hey, here are the 10 things I have. Is this more important than that? And if they say yes, then have them explain it. And if they can't, then okay, then it goes below. You can, a lot of what being a product manager is just convincing other people that you know what you're doing, and gaining their trust, and being transparent with them about things. So it's not in order to hide things, but you do need the flexibility to own your product and to have the ability to prioritize things as you see fit, because you are going to be the one responsible for it in the long run, not your stakeholders, not the people working around you. You are responsible for that, and you will be responsible if something breaks or if something doesn't go according to plan. So you need to be strong enough to say, this is less important. And sometimes that sucks. It sucks to say it, and it sucks to hear that as well. But that's
how do you resist the bad situation of whoever yells the loudest gets what they want?
You can't always. That's not an ideal situation, but you can't always, because if the CEO comes down and says, I want this, are you going to say no? You can try. If you have a good report, you can say no. And if you have other people backing you up, then maybe you can push that away a little bit. But in the end, you don't own the company, probably. And someone who does and can fire you will get their way. It's not ideal, and you shouldn't be in those situations, but it is an unfortunate reality that a lot of companies do work that way.
Yes, at the end of the day, if you're an employee of the company, some of these things are the truth decisions is of the employer, not the employee.
Yeah, you need to convey what it is you need to convey. You need to convince them, and you can try. And if you don't succeed, then you need to do what you've been told. It sucks. It's soul crushing. But it's educational at the same time.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. Okay, I'm going to propose we take a little break before picking up again for a second part about how to work together as PM and first of all, engineer, but also engineering manager.
All right.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right.